Welcome everyone, and happy Friday also. So my name is Vince Daniele. I'm a team manager here at Imagine It, and I've been with the company for about 10 years. Prior to being a team manager, I was on the technical team doing solutions consulting, and I've always had a passion for architecture and visualization. My background is in architecture, so we've got this new partnership with Twinmotion that I'm really excited to present today. Just a little bit about me. I'm, like I mentioned, team manager here and from Detroit, Michigan. My wife and I just welcomed our first child into the world in March, right before all the COVID stuff hit. So there's a little picture of myself with my wife and our daughter, and I can't forget our little dog Duke here. So yeah, welcome everyone to the presentation. And before I get into demo mode and videos, I just want to mention a few things about Twinmotion. For those of you that don't know what Twinmotion is or have never seen it before, Twinmotion is a really great visualization tool. I like to call it a communication tool that we can use to display our 3D models in a pretty realistic way, a photorealistic way. So we can leverage 3D models, whether they were authored in Revit or AutoCAD, 3ds Max. We can use this tool as our visualization aid to really make our 3D models come to life and to share those with ownership and in a lot of different ways. So some of the ways I have listed here, we have we can output high quality still images. We can output 360-degree panoramas, so static when you're in one place to look around. Standard video output, 360-degree virtual reality videos, so like a 360-degree panel, but instead of being static, you can actually move through that video and look around. And then a really great thing that Twinmotion does is one click to immersive VR. So if you do have a VR headset, you can connect it right into your computer, hit a button in Twinmotion, and you're fully immersed in the scene that you're creating and building. And we'll see some of these other bullet points here. Unprecedented real-time quality. It's a pretty easy program, really intuitive to learn and use. It contains all of the media output and setup for media in one place. So just some of the key points there that are really great with Twinmotion, and some examples of what it can do to the right there in those images. But before I go into the full demo mode, I do have a video that I want to play. So to kind of tee this up, my team here at Imagine It, we've been working on building these data sets for Twinmotion and presenting it to our customers in different ways. And one great way I think to show it off or to show what it can do is showing you this video first. So what kind of a final output looks like in the form of a video, and show you what goes into creating that type of output and how quick and easy the program is to use. So it's pretty exciting, and I'll go ahead and play the video here and talk over it. Now, in the video, we can include sound effects and different music, I guess. Well, I guess any music that you would play over, you'd want to do that in post-production. But chatter from people or footsteps walking through the scene, you can bake those into the presentation. We can't, unfortunately, hear that over the stream of the web service. So unfortunately, you have to listen to me talk over it instead of hearing some of the sound effects and things that we built into this video. But as you can see here, the render quality of the video is really great. This is a model that came from Revit. So we built the model in Revit, and then we really tricked it out in Twinmotion with vegetation, lighting. We see our little Imagine It flag there blowing in the wind, and worked on materials and all of the people that were added to this. So all of these sort of, we might call it landscape furniture or these different assets, these are all added in Twinmotion to add to our scene. The little smoke coming from the computer is another feature that can be added in Twinmotion. It's called a particle system. So for those of you with 3ds Max experience, you probably have some knowledge of what particle systems are. But then just some other images showing depth of field, how we can change the time of the day. There's a few towards the end here that show you how you can change the season. So the trees, the vegetation changes color. We can change to winter time to show snow, and then age the trees over time. So a lot of cool stuff. You see the cars are animated through that scene. All of those things were added in Twinmotion and not authored from some other program. So really the majority of the modeling work was done in Revit to produce the building and the 3D model, but everything else that you see, all of the effects, the lighting, the people, all of that was added in Twinmotion. So quick 2-minute video there, but I'm going to now go into sort of the process behind creating that and how quick and easy and fun it is to create these scenes. All right. So real quick here, I do have both Twinmotion and Revit open. Now Twinmotion, we have some different blog posts that I'll mention at the end where you can look to see what file formats are supported in Twinmotion. But for the most part, our customers are dealing with Autodesk programs. So we wanted to focus this on sort of an Autodesk program workflow, and probably primarily for architectural users, they're using Revit. Now, I will add the disclaimer that we can use other programs, like I mentioned before, AutoCAD. You can take models from Navisworks and export them out to Twinmotion. So this process does not require you to have Revit. However, with Revit, there is a Twinmotion plugin that allows us, it's called a direct link, and this allows us to take our Revit models, so our BIM models right from Revit, and link them into Twinmotion. This is the only Autodesk program at the time that has the direct link feature, but like I mentioned before, from Navisworks, AutoCAD, Inventor, 3ds Max, we can still push the 3D model information from those programs via FBX or OBJ or DXF. We can push that model information into Twinmotion and import it. But Revit is the only one currently that supports a direct link feature or functionality. So just looking at this, we call it a community center data set that we pulled from Autodesk source. So it's a pretty basic, it's not a huge file, but it's not really small either. But you can see with this data set, there's some RPC trees here, and I am just in a shaded view, so they look like cardboard cutouts. All the furniture and everything was placed in Revit. We do have some of these kind of arborvitae trees in the front to fill out the landscaping around the entrance and the front courtyard. So all of this was built into Revit, and we'll scroll down. I do have, actually this one's unlinked, but you can also have your Revit files, your other links. So if you have structure, MEP linked in, and push it out to Twinmotion, it will carry all of that data with it if you want it to. So there's a setting where you can include the links and push them into Twinmotion. So just real quick, with this Twinmotion add-in, the direct link, if I click the See in Twinmotion button, automatically what it does is it fires up this utility. And if you don't already have Twinmotion open, it's going to open up Twinmotion and give you this option for direct link. So we can either link this Revit model that I'm using into an existing project or create a completely new project from scratch. And that's what I'll do just for the sake of this demonstration, is go into a new project, and it should be building it. Let me close this out. So it's syncing that data up in the background. Now I'm not going to go through this whole process. We're going to have some training courses and things. So if you are interested in any training, we're going to have a one-day fundamentals offering where I can go through the details of this process. But for the sake of the demo, I just want to show you how easy it is to get that model from Revit into Twinmotion and some of the benefits of using a direct link and seeing what we get from that direct link process. So Should only take a few more seconds here. And as we're waiting, I'll just talk about the background. So the default in Twinmotion does have this cityscape background and a default plane, sort of a staging environment for your scene. You can change all of this out really, really quickly. So if you're not in a city environment, you can remove that background or add a different type of countryside or hilly background. The plane that it starts with is just kind of this ground texture with brick pavers. So I'm not sure why that's the default, but it is. So you can kind of see this herringbone pattern, brick pattern, but all of this stuff can be changed. And for the sake of this, I'll just delete it out. So we're looking at kind of an island, but we can see that really quickly and easily with the direct link, I was able to take that Revit model right into Twinmotion. And not only did it bring in the 3D objects and 3D components, but it also translated any of those Autodesk materials that were assigned to the building in Revit. It does a translation and brings those materials into Twinmotion. So yes, the materials are included, but we all know Revit materials aren't the greatest, so you probably will take some time and go through and replace them. And one of the benefits of having it be a direct link is if we update our materials via Twinmotion to this model, when we reassign the link, so just really quick, I'm going to grab this and maybe change the color of something. So you can see we can change the color of the material really quickly in Twinmotion, or if you want to replace it completely, I'll just grab brick material real quick, drop it on that wall. We can place the brick, scale it up. I'll talk a little bit more about materials in a second here, but very quick and easy to swap that out with the Revit object. And you can see that Twinmotion does a much better job of rendering it in real time than we would get from Revit. But the nice thing about having a direct link is if we start making changes to our Revit model, if we're moving walls around or changing our design, or maybe we have other design options baked in that we want to push forward, because of the direct link, any changes that occur within the Revit model, if we want to update them back to Twinmotion, you simply click this button again. It will open this up, and then you choose existing project if you've already saved your Twinmotion project, and then it will update any of the changes, but still maintain the material assignment. So I didn't make any changes to the Revit model. I still have this file open. I haven't saved it yet, but you can see that even though it synced up the Revit model, it still maintained this material that I assigned in Twinmotion to that wall coming from the Revit model. So maybe I should have drawn some things in Revit, but you get the idea that direct link, it is a one-directional link. So we can't change the material in Twinmotion and then send it back to Revit, and we can't add things to the Twinmotion environment and push them back to Revit. So it is kind of a one-directional exchange. But for those of you that are just looking for a quick way to really make your Revit renderings pop, this is a great solution without having to do a whole bunch of extra work, or we don't need to model anything up in Twinmotion. We're just linking it back and forth, or not back and forth, I should say. We're linking it from Revit into the Twinmotion environment. Very similar to how the FBX linking between Revit and 3ds Max works, if you're used to that. So for the sake of the demo, I am going to get out of this and open up a file that's a little bit more complete, that we spent a little bit more time on in setting cameras up. But before I get out of this, one last thing I'll point out. These RPC trees from Revit were replaced with Twinmotion trees. Now, I'm not sure why it doesn't replace every single one of the trees. There might be some type of mapping communication between the tree types that doesn't work out correctly, so we're just left with this kind of the cardboard cutout from Revit. But if we want to get rid of that with the link, you can't delete objects out, but we can hide them. So if I just pick this tree, this is called the scene graph. I can hide it in the scene graph, it goes away, and then we can place our own vegetation in that spot using Twinmotion assets like trees. So I'll just drag and drop a tree there to update it. So I don't know why, like I said, all of them aren't replaced automatically. My guess is there's just not a tree type in Twinmotion that directly is associated with maybe this red oak tree type, so that's why it's still just blank. But once it's in here, you do have the ability to update things and place new objects. So we go ahead and I will open up a different file here that's a little bit more complete. And it shouldn't take too long to open this, so just bear with me. And I'll kind of walk through what it takes to really build the scene, and you'll get a sense of how quickly you can really make your renderings and visualizations pop with minimal, I guess you don't need to be a visualization pro to really grasp the concepts from Twinmotion. So it's a really great tool to get into your model and start to make it look like it has better context or put things in context to really make the renderings pop. You don't need to be a 3ds Max whiz. You don't need to be a Maya or Blender whiz. You can do all of this with just a little bit of training. I should close out of Revit while this is happening just to free up some memory. Okay. All right, there we go. So looks familiar. It's the model that was used in the animation video at the beginning. So we can see that in real time as this model was completed here, we can see things like the wind blowing, the flag. So those aren't things that are just tied to animation. We can see them in real time. So all of the motion that we see, the wind blowing through the trees, the birds flying around, all of that would carry right over into VR or a real-time viewing of the model. I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quicker than I did last week because we kind of got cut short on the Q&A time. So I'm just going to kind of zoom into this area, or let me go up. There we go. And navigating this program is really easy. I'm just using my mouse right now. And for those of you that have any experience with playing video games or computer games, Twinmotion does use WASD for directional navigation and just the right click drag of the mouse button to look around. So pretty common if you're a gamer. It's really easy to navigate, and you can kind of teleport up or down using Q and E and ground yourself to walk around in the model. So this is a space that I spent a little bit of time on to add materials and things, but I'll spend a few minutes here to show you some of the key features of what we can do here really quickly with Twinmotion using some of the assets that come with the program. So first off, I want to show you how easy it is to apply materials and change the material settings. So right now we've got these concrete columns. Maybe I want to replace the concrete column, or first just adjust the settings. So the little eyedropper tool allows us to pick materials. And as soon as we do that, at the bottom of the program, very intuitive little pop-up sort of ribbon across the bottom, it opens up our material editor. With the material editor, we can change the color. And you can see in real time, it updates the color of those columns. Make them lighter. Let's make them nice light blue. We can assign different texture maps, or actually, this would be a diffuse color map that we can assign. So right now it's based off of this concrete map, but you can build your own materials in Twinmotion. So we're not set to just what we have out of the box. So you can assign your own textures. You can change the luminosity, so lighten up the material or darken it. And one of the really fun features and a really nice one that we have here for materials in Twinmotion is this ability to assign grunge. So who wants a dirty material, right? Well, the more imperfection that you include in your visualizations, the more realistic they're actually going to look. I'm sure we've all seen renderings that look beautiful, but everything is perfect, right? The material of the walls, perfect paint, there's no variation in it. the glass is perfectly clear. In reality, nothing looks like that. I'm looking out the window in my office right now, and the windows are filthy. You know, it's scattering light in different ways. So all of those little imperfections really improve the look of the visualization. One of the quick tools we have is this grunge setting. So I can bump the grunge up and see how moldy or mildewy the columns look, or I can maybe make this down, maybe not quite as much as it was originally, but just, you know, around a 15%. Now it looks a little bit, maybe with the blue color on it, doesn't really look realistic, but we can apply that grunge to other surfaces like painted walls, ceilings, just to give it a little bit more pop to make it look more real. So it's a quick setting there. Some of the other material settings we have, we can change reflection. So as I bump up the reflection here of the material, you can see how it's reflecting more light. Bump up the scale, so you're basically tiling it. You do have the option to change and to move that, the UVW mapping or the UV texture on the surface, and you can slide it around and position it. So if you ever run into an instance where you're trying to line a floor tile or a ceiling tile up with, say, a light within that grid, we can use these moving options or the move settings to move that texture along that surface. All right, so I'm just going to back out, and we can also include if we want the surface to be affected by weather or not affected by the weather. Obviously, this one's inside, so hopefully it's not affected by any weather like rain or snow, so we would turn that off. But if something is outside and we want it to be affected by the weather, that's just a default that always turns on. So if you have a parking lot or something that you want snow to pile up on, you just want to make sure that the asphalt material has weather turned on. And then just some other stuff. We do have texture bump maps that we can assign. You can illuminate the objects to make them glow and turn them on, or turn the metalness up of the object to make it a metal material. So all options that we can change natively with these materials. Now, if I want to replace the material completely with the Twinmotion material, then all we have to do is find the appropriate material that we want to use. I'll just use, we're going to make these big wood columns here. So I'll take a mahogany and I can place it on the column, and notice that it updates every one of the columns with that wood, and then you can go through the settings to adjust scaling and the look of it. Now you do have the option of assigning the material to everything that currently has the same material assigned to it. So the reason it swapped out the mahogany on all of the columns is because the concrete was assigned to those columns in the first place. So it just simply replaced the concrete with the mahogany. So anywhere else in the model that had that same concrete material assigned to it that we're not seeing would inherently take on the mahogany wood. Well, sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. We do have the option of changing the material setting to apply just to a single object, and then we can place that material on an individual object rather than all of the things of the same material. So you do have those options. That's a common question that we get asked when people first get into the program. Other than that, with materials, I think I covered enough of the materials there, but you could see here, this is kind of cool, just to show you that we can do custom stuff. You know, we have our Imagine It logo here. I just created a very simple asset and put our Imagine It logo onto a material. So I was able to put that on the wall, and this can move around and everything right in Twinmotion. Whoops, I have to grab the whole thing, I guess. But that's just a custom material that was created. And one of the really cool things that other programs, I haven't seen any program do this as easily as Twinmotion does. We can actually assign video clips as a material. So all of these little LED or LCD screens that we have on these columns have this video clip playing, and that's one of my colleagues, Joe Eikens here, doing a presentation. So we pulled a MP4 video clip just to show you that all you have to do is insert that as a material. I worked a little bit on the scaling and moving it around to make sure it matched the aspect ratio of the TV screens but you can see that's playing there, and pretty cool. And the same thing kind of with that flag out front that was blowing in the wind. You just replace the flag material with our Imagine It logo to show that that's customizable. So that's basically all that I need to show about materials. Just really quickly, I already have replaced out the standard chairs and everything in the scene, but let me jump to a different area. Let's teleport downstairs here to this, whoops. As I add to this demo, I'm kind of working on the entire model here as I go. But these chairs or these table sets are really meant to be outdoor table set. So I can click here, and you can see the table is placed in Revit as an object, and in the scene graph, it's telling us what that family is. It's an outdoor table, so why would we have it inside? Well, we could delete these out, because I've, in this file, instead of it being a direct link from Revit, I just imported the FBX that I created from Revit. So unlike a direct link, we can delete things out and move things around. So with a direct link, everything is static because it needs to have that connection back to the source. But in an import, we don't need that connection. So we can delete things, we can remove them. So any of those cardboard trees that come through, you can delete them and just replace them completely. One really fun thing to do in Twinmotion is start to build out the scene with the Twinmotion objects. So we do have a stock set of objects from Twinmotion. And I'll just go to some of our home objects here and grab a table with some chairs. But bringing these in is just finding them in your library. You can search here at the top and just dragging and dropping them into the scene. So the Twinmotion objects tend to be a lot more detailed for visualization than anything that we get from a Revit family. So a lot of them are probably authored in programs like 3ds Max and then compiled in these libraries that are provided for free with the Twinmotion software. But anything outside of what we get sort of out of the box with Twinmotion, we can import our own assets and start to build our own object libraries in Twinmotion as well. So just really quick, I'll grab this table. Maybe I want to use this one in a future project that I'm working in. From the scene graph, just right-clicking over it, you can add this to what is called your user library. And what that does is back in the asset browser here, if I back up all the way to the beginning, I have a user library, and these are filled with custom things that we've created. So different things that you add to your user library, including the outdoor table and chairs that I just added to the library. So even though I'm working in this project, once you add something to your user library, it's just like a tool palette in AutoCAD. You can grab this and bring it into your active project. So this is stored separately from the project that you're working in. So if I do click on this, I can add the table and chairs to this project or any of my other projects. One thing I did, just testing this out, when you do buy a license of Twinmotion, you have unlimited access to Quixel, which is an online database of all of these different visualization textures and 3D assets. I pulled some assets from Quixel and compiled them, built them in Twinmotion. So this is just a little rose here that I built. And you can see that even though this was not available out of the box with Twinmotion, I built it completely from the 3D assets, FBX assets that I was able to gather. And this rose is now something that I can use in all of my projects. So I just like to point that out, that even if things are not available from our asset library, we can create our own content that can be reused in a lot of different ways in Twinmotion. And what's nice about it is I can grab the rose, I can change the material on the rose. So if I wanted to update it to be a different color, we can do that. So all of these things are editable. They're not parametric like the vegetation that we'll see outside of the building, but they're more of like a static 3D object, but you do have the ability to create your own libraries. Now getting back to these objects, if I want to swap out all of the chairs, another really nice feature, you could use sort of placeholder objects inside of Revit or inside of whatever other program you're using to author your 3D model. And if it's just a placeholder, it might be low poly or just something that doesn't look great for visualization but looks good in plans. Well, once we get into Twinmotion, we can grab a whole bunch of them at once. So I'm just holding Control down, clicking on all of these chairs, tables, right-click in my scene graph, and I have the option here to replace this object. Once you do that, you can grab the object that you want to replace it with. Let's find a nice little, better table than the one I picked before. Let's just do this little, that one looks good. So you can grab multiple objects. So if we wanted to randomize and scatter different objects throughout that selection, we could do that. I'm just going to keep it to this one table set, click the start replacement, and watch this. It just swapped out everything at once. And now these are fully editable, just like everything else. I can move it around, rotate it, move individual chairs. So you have a lot of control there. And then finally, I think the last thing I want to show, I mean, I could spend a long time showing you all of the different objects and assets here, but the ones that really pop, replacing objects is a really cool feature. Putting new furniture in, there are all these little decorative objects to make everything just look more real, like it's an actual space and not just some plain BIM model. So you can add all of these different little decorations and plant objects on top of the tables. So up an orchid, and you'll see that placement, it automatically detects surfaces. So as soon as you hover your mouse over it, boom, place the plant. Maybe that scale's not right. Just scale individual parts of it down. So there's all types of stuff that you can do. There we go. Scale the whole thing with these objects. Some of the favorite objects to place are the ones that are animated. So this gets really fun. We can place particles like the smoke in the video. So that's pretty cool. There's fog that moves around, but then we also have character animation. So there's all of these different characters. We have animated, we have groups, we have posed people that are static, and then just kind of 2D cutouts, but also animals. With animated humans, we can grab someone from that group, add them to the scene. You can see quickly she's moving around, she's talking. We could change what she's wearing, the type of pose. So here's some fun ones. We can make her talking hand gestures to someone, or even dancing. And with those different poses, there are even different variations of the pose. So you have her dance really weird, or maybe slow dance. There's just some really fun things that you can do. I like to point out that we do have some different animals. So a little dog to our scene. Rotate our dog around. And right now, I should point out, on my computer, I don't have the best spec computer. My computer is a few years old now, so it's got a pretty decent workstation graphics card, so it can still do all this stuff. You really don't need a super high-end graphics card to build the scenes out. And when you render it, it will be high quality, but just based on the limitations of my GPU, it defaults the quality settings within Twinmotion to be medium across the board. If I did have a better graphics card, and we're finding that the RTX graphics cards that are out can really do a good job of handling and making lighting and things look better in real time when you're working in the environment. But you can set it to then a higher setting with a better GPU. For the sake of the demo and being online and doing a webcast, I'm just keeping everything on medium so I don't crash. So just keep that there. But when you do your final output, when you export your renderings or images, it will look much better than what you're seeing on my screen. If you have the higher end GPU, maybe the differences aren't as much between what you're seeing on screen and your final output, but I just like to point that out. Okay. So I think that's good with the objects. There are groups of people, so whoops, click grab a group. So you can start dragging, multiple animated people in there and just really start building the scene, which you saw in the video. It's just a matter of grabbing the assets that you want, placing them in, and I will go here. Whoops, I don't want to run into the wall here, but just teleport outside and start to look at some of the outside stuff. You can see all the different vegetation that was placed. So these, again, are just objects. So we do have a number of vegetation objects that can be placed, like trees. You can replace a landscape, so the ground. One neat thing about landscape is when the landscape is there, I should grab it. When we do have a landscape placed, zoom out to, I've got to get way out here. Just bear with me 1 second. Zooming out here to the landscape. We can sculpt terrain. So there's a bunch of different settings to push, pull the terrain. Let me make this intensity. I'll exaggerate this quite a bit. But you can start to paint and mess with some of the terrain to really start to sculpt and contour the terrain. Some of the other terrain settings that we have, back up here, we have this paint terrain. So what that does is it allows you to assign different types of grass or material to the terrain. So if I want to go grassy ground, I can start to paint and discolor. Maybe that's not doing the best job at it right now. My computer's starting to play catch up, so I don't want to push this too hard, but with the terrain, there we go. So with the terrain that I'm pulling here, we can start to paint it out in the distance and do some different pretty cool effect stuff without knowing too much about that. All right, so without getting caught up too much in the vegetation, just a few things. With vegetation, we do have an age, so we can increase or decrease the age of certain objects. It's not just scaling it up, it's actually adding different characteristics. So it's not just making our leaves really big, it's adding more branches, making the trees more full. So it's really like it's growing the vegetation. One of the other cool features about vegetation that we have, I was gonna zoom here to one of these planter boxes, delete out these that I placed earlier. There's also a tool in here for vegetation paint and vegetation scatter. So the paint allows you to paint with trees or bushes, just like I was painting the ground, you're actually painting with assets. Or we could do vegetation scatter. So right now I've got this empty flower bed. If I choose vegetation scatter and pick some of the different objects that I want to scatter within that flower bed, let's say some of these different flower types. So just adding these sort of to my queue of objects that I want to paint within the flower bed. Whoops, back up there. I hit the wrong button. I go back to my vegetation scatter. Oops, why is it doing this? Sorry, I shouldn't be clicking on this first. So let's go back to vegetation scatter. Cool, it remembers what I had. I pick the 3 different types: paint bucket, tool, scatter, add, click in the flower bed, and it automatically fills in and populates that flower bed with flowers. This asset is really spread out, so it does some weird stuff outside of this flower bed, but that vegetation scatter could be used on large surfaces like grass surfaces or ground surfaces. So kind of maybe focusing it in a flower bed's not the best application of it, but I want to show that instead of doing big ground here, because again, that's going to make thousands of things, and I don't want this to freeze up as I'm doing the demonstration here. So pretty cool stuff. And then lastly, with the outside, and I've got about 3 minutes left, and then I'll get back to the PowerPoint and we can open up the Q&A. But within the Twinmotion project, we can change location of the project. We can adjust the weather. So this is something that's really powerful. Add clouds, make it a rainy environment. We could change the time of the year as shown in the video. So As you go through fall, you see the tree color changes, the season. If we go to winter, bring snow in here, we can see snow falling, really cool stuff. Move it back to sunny skies in the summertime. We can change globally the growth of all of our vegetation, and you can animate all of this, pretty neat. And you can also add different effects like wind speed, direction, smog, which just kind of creates a distance fog here. So as I bump that up, you can see the mountains start to fade away. So a lot of kind of global settings for the project that can be controlled. Now, finally, I'll get to the media. One of my favorite things about Twinmotion is that we can spend all of this time really optimizing and building the model up and creating the context, and we don't have to take forever to create our output. So unlike 3ds Max, where maybe building the scene is 50% and then tweaking your render settings is another 50% of your time, Twinmotion, much like Revit, is spent where it matters, in the design and the layout of the model, and then the output is just sort of a secondary thing that we can do very quickly. So in creating images, if I want to create an image and save it to the project of what we're looking at here, you just go to the view that you want to see, click the button to create the image, and boom, it saves it to the project. So I have all of these other predefined or pre-designated images. Spoiler alert, I was going to save that one for the end, but just a different area inside a room in the building. But you can see all of these different predefined images. So really simple to create the image, and then to output these is just an export. You can pick as many images to export as at once, so I can pick all of these different thumbnails, start export, and what it's going to do is it's going to create all of those as image files that we can share out, or we can put on our website, or do whatever you need to with the images. You do have the ability to control the settings, so you can scale the images up. We can turn on 3D mode, which basically is like your panorama, or I should say your stereoscopic image. We can create panoramas. Video creation, very simple. If I go to video creation and create a video, this is just done through a very simple keyframing format. So you start at one image, I might navigate and sort of move through the model, add another keyframe, and then it automatically animates from point A to point B within the animation, and then we can increase or decrease the time. We can have different video segments. So if I were to open up the one where we created the 2-minute video I showed at the beginning, there's multiple video clips within that same file, just different keyframes that it goes through and transitions between the video clips. One other thing I should point out with videos is that we do have the option of changing the settings of the environment and animating that within the video. So I can go to the second clip of the interior here and maybe change the time of the year to winter just to show this. It looks like because I'm on medium setting, it does this with the snow, but it's just because the quality I'm on here. If I turned it off, the snow would go away. But just for the sake of the time that we have here, I'm not going to change all of that. Let me go back to my video. Darn. So changing the weather, it will automatically then between the frames. So right now there's no snow. Play it. It's a slow 10-second clip, and it's going to turn the snow on at probably halfway through. There we go, to show the snow. So not a quick transition there because I went straight from summer to winter, but if I had added keyframes of the seasons in between, it'd be a much smoother transition, but really quick to keyframe. One final thing that I want to show, and I think this is a huge selling point of the program, and one thing that really makes it separates it from anything, well, maybe not anything else, but it separates it from a lot of other more expensive software on the market. We have this presenter mode that we can create in Twinmotion. What the presenter mode does is it packages all of these images, all of the videos and panoramas that you might have made in your project, and it creates an executable file where we can send that off to our client. And it's basically a really high-end immersive viewer that we can share out. It doesn't require the user to have a license of Twinmotion. So all they have to do is run the exe. That's it. And I will open that up real quick. So I'm going to get out of here. I have this set up so I can quickly click on it. Come on, Twinmotion, close. All right. So as this opens up, it might take it a second, but I'll just kind of let that do its thing. And I'll get back to my PowerPoint here, but I'll show you at the end here what this presenter mode looks like. So just kind of recap. So really, I think the things that separate Twinmotion and why it's something to consider investing in for your visualizations is we can produce all of this stuff in-house. You don't have to outsource or use cloud services to produce these projects. You don't need to be a visualization pro to be good at Twinmotion. You don't need to dedicate additional hardware investment to like a render farm to create these images. And oops, there's a presenter. Let me minimize this real quick. And it's just a great option to communicate design intent to our owners and to stakeholders and projects. Just quick system requirements here. We can share all of this stuff out, and actually through our Imagine It blog, we have this stuff posted so you can reference it there. But minimum specs for really the sake of quality of what we're seeing, you definitely want to have a good GPU. You want to have a decent processor, and you want to have some dedicated video RAM for that. So minimum specs here, any GPU that has DirectX or DirectX 12 capabilities. The recommended specs are pretty high end. You don't need to get to this level to get a good look out of Twinmotion. But if you really want to tap into the visualization in real time as you're building your scenes, these types of specs make it a lot nicer. I don't know anything about Mac requirements, so I'll just post it there and won't talk about it. But for the sake of comparison and what we saw today, this is what I'm running on my computer. And like I said, this is a few years old. I do have a lot of CPU RAM. This doesn't have a whole bunch of video RAM. I'm only running on 4 gigs on an older Quadro card, and my processor isn't super fast. So there are some limitations with what I can show, and that's why it defaults to medium quality. Just some other information. So we are running a promotional offer through Imagine It for Twinmotion that goes through September 1st of this year. So if you want more information on what our cost is on that, please reach out to us. That does include free upgrades until December 2021. We are also offering just a quick start 1-day Twinmotion fundamentals course that will go through materials and object placement and building your own user libraries. But we also have, just like anything we do at Imagine It, we do have custom training available. And if you want additional resources, on our blog, we have a whole area dedicated to virtual reality, which highlights a lot of the Twinmotion stuff. So there's a link there. And before I get to the Q&A, just really quick, because we're down to 10, in the presenter, this is what it looks like if you package this up and send it to an owner. So you have your different thumbnails saved in the images at the bottom. You can quickly click on these to navigate to the different images. The really cool thing about the presenter mode is that if we go to a saved image, we can look around that image, and unlike just a static stereo pano, we can move around that environment as well. So we can share out a fully capable, fully functional 3D virtual walkthrough to our owners. You could even embed videos in here. We just, for this file size, we took those videos out. But you can change lighting. So your daylighting, come on there we go. So we could change the time of the day to look at the shadows in real time. You could change the speed that you walk through the environment, and there's a quick button to get to VR. So you have VR capabilities when you share out the EXE, and I think that's a huge thing. It packages this EXE up into an app that we can share with owners, and it has everything that we built into our Twinmotion project. So really cool stuff. I will stop there, and we've got about 10-ish minutes to do the Q&A. So
Okay, great. Thanks, Spence.
what do we have, Lisa?
We have, our first question is, how does it handle very complex Revit models like 500 megabytes and higher?
So really it handles them really well, depending on what hardware specs you have. The more video memory that you have, the better it will handle larger scenes. The example that I'm using here is just the architectural model from that community center. I've exported the MEP model and the structure, and it does fine. It processes it fine, but just for the sake of navigating and the smoothness of the video, we just remove those because it does tend to slow it down a bit. So the more textures that you have, the more polygons you have, the more video memory that you're going to want to have. So it really depends on your hardware setup.
Okay. Is the presenter mode the same or similar to Enscape?
It's similar, but it's not the same. I can't speak to all of the features in Enscape, and Keniston's on the call. He knows a little bit more about Enscape than I do, but Enscape is more of a connected live model with the Revit model that you can navigate through. I don't know if it has a capability of packaging up a presenter or not. Keniston,
So
do you have
it
the answer?
does. I can answer part of this for
Okay.
you. So Enscape does the same exe type file that Twinmotion exports. So it's basically that same process of just exporting to that exe and sharing that with your client. They both have the ability to just run it through there to move around the model like you saw here. I don't know about all the other modes. I know that the Enscape has some different modes like the white mode and things like that, but I'm not sure on the Twinmotion side as far as the different modes that you can run inside a presenter. So maybe you could answer that portion of that.
Twinmotion has something similar to a white mode called clay mode, in which you can actually, just like in white mode in Enscape, by the way, this is Keniston, you can actually turn your screen and the presenter in Twinmotion into that clay mode to get a very, very similar effect. You also have a number of other different modes, depending on how you want to present that scene. In regards to similarities on the exe files, with Enscape, it's a very basic exe. Again, everything that is in there is based off of a direct link with Revit. And so, like Vincent mentioned earlier, if you don't have the best materials in Revit, you're going to notice it in Enscape. Conversely, in Twinmotion, as you guys have seen, the materials and animated objects, things of that nature, are much, much better than what you're currently getting in Enscape. So, they both have some basic ideas that are similar, but Twinmotion, if you were to present to a customer or client both presentations out of the two softwares, they will walk away blown away by Twinmotion.
Awesome, thanks, Keniston. Okay, our next one is, can you export from Twinmotion to FBX, 3ds Max, DWF, any of those types of file formats?
No. The program is not meant to be a model authoring program to go between or to push out to other programs yet. There is a roadmap through Twinmotion's website, which we could share the link out, and I think we probably have it somewhere in our blog,
yes,
a link to the roadmap. But they are working on, the big thing here is being able to take the Twinmotion model that we create and open it in Unreal Engine. So all of Twinmotion, I should have mentioned this earlier, is built on the Unreal gaming engine. Currently, we can't push it back to Unreal, but they're working on that process. So it's in the roadmap. Once we can do that, it opens up a whole bunch of different options. So see the other question. So currently, no, we can't import to Unreal, but that's something in the works. Other question about the VR experience, is it compatible with any headset? Currently, it's compatible with HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, and I think the Vive Plus. So there are 3 primary headsets. So basically anything with Steam VR is compatible with.
Okay, well, we have a couple more minutes. So can you bring in site data or topography files?
Yes, and I would recommend going to our blog post about the file formats that are accepted. The workflow for the Autodesk programs for site stuff would be going from either Civil 3D directly to InfraWorks and then exporting out of InfraWorks as an FBX. Or if you want to take the contour data, the coordinate data from Civil, you can bring it into Twinmotion and it will create your topo or your surfaces based on TXT or XYZ text formats.
Okay, and also, can you change the size of the panels on the interface to free up more space?
The big one with that is, to a limited extent, there is a minimum size that they default to, which is kind of large to begin with, and we can make them larger, but you can't make them smaller, and we can't drag out the panels and dock them onto other screens or do too much else with that. So the interface is kind of locked down currently. So
Okay, and we have
just get used to it.
Okay, and we've got time for one more question. Can you use an external rendering engine?
External rendering engines are currently not supported, so it is rendering from the Unreal Engine rendering. There is, in the roadmap, there are some compatibility items related to V-Ray materials that they're working on, and they are working on some of the more advanced features or integrating some of the more advanced features from Unreal into Twinmotion for doing things like render passes. But the rendering engine is really baked into the program. So quick answer to that is no, but there will be improvements.
Okay. And then one last one, because it's 1 o'clock Central Time anyway, so we'll need to wrap up. Can the still images in presenter mode be saved on the client?
Yeah, so they can do, it's a screen cap. So basically, if you go to the image, you can hit a button to do a screen cap of it to save it.
Okay, so that way the client could save something from there just by doing that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all very much for attending today. We appreciate your time. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation, and this concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.